name is Dan McFinsky, and this is my first video tutorial on C++. So first off, I'd like to try and keep this between 10 and 15 minutes. So I'm going to try and cover the basics here. Visual Studio, the IDE, I'm going to give you a basic overview of the interface. I'm going to try and go over a basic C++ program and a couple things that you can do in a very simple C++ program. Okay, so starting off with Visual Studio. Visual Studio is an IDE that allows you to program in many different languages. You can see if you install Visual Studio and try and start a new project that it has templates for at least 4 different languages. We've got Visual C++, Visual Basic, Visual C#, Visual F#, and then it has other project types, database stuff, and I don't know what's under test projects, but basically all these templates allow you to start projects that are related to different kinds of programming languages and such. So I'm going to start off by teaching how to create Windows 32 console applications because it's the quickest way to get into C++ programming. When you get into Windows 32 programming, it gets a little more complicated, and it's better to start off with fundamentals in console programming and forget about all of the features of Windows in order to learn the basics. So when you start a Visual Studio project, you always want to start with Windows under the Visual C++ tab, Win32 program, and a Win32 console application template. So the first thing it's going to do is ask you to give it a name. I'm going to call this the Hello World project, and I'm going to put it in my directory here, projects, C++ workshops, intro to C++. So I'll hit OK, and the second thing that happens is a dialog box pops up and asks me if there's anything I want to do here. I always hit next and always check off empty project. If you don't check off empty project, you'll get extra headers and extra files that will make your project more confusing. So stick with the empty project. Then I hit finish, and now we're ready. We have our new project started here. So let me go over the interface really quick. So you have your basic drop-down menus at the top. You've got a toolbar here, which ends up being really, really useful. You've got your Solution Explorer on the left. And the bottom, you've got a couple tabs: code definition, output, and these are useful as well in the future. On the right side, you've got properties. These aren't really necessary to learn right now. Like toolbox, not necessary right now. So I'm going to focus here on the drop-down menu first. Clearly, the new button here gives you new project. That's where you're going to start most of your new projects. You can open a project. These are all pretty self-explanatory. I'll let you go through these. A lot of these other ones you can explore, but you'll learn them as you start using Visual Studio. So your Solutions Explorer is extremely important. So here we have the solution called Hello World, and it has one project in it. A solution can have multiple projects in it. So this one project that we created, Hello World, is only one project in the solution, and that's all that we need for now. But just know that in the future you can start building solutions with many projects, and they can be dependent on each other. So one can be a library that another one uses, or they can be related in some other way, or they don't even have to be related. So here we go. Our Hello World project has expandability and collapsibility. Basically, what's important here is that we have all these folders and they're all empty right now. So our project is empty. As we add files, our project will start becoming populated. And the way to add files is that you can right-click on the Hello World, and this is the way I recommend adding them, and go to New Item. And if you add them through this method, then each time you add a file, it'll organize it properly under each folder there on the project. If you add a file through the File New file or Control-N, then it won't necessarily catalog everything properly or organize everything properly in these directories. So there are keyboard shortcuts related to adding files and projects. Clearly, the Control-Shift-A adds a new project or adds a new file. Shift-Alt-A adds an existing item. So if you had a file from another project that you wanted to add, you can use the existing item, Shift-Alt-A. But let's just focus on new item, Control-Shift-A. So I'm going to go ahead and add a new item here. And what happens is it pops up this dialog box. It asks me what kind of item I want to add. Because I've right-clicked on my project and knows it's a Visual C++ project, it gives me the Visual C++ templates. And so here I can select from a variety of C++ related project files. So here I'm going to add a C++ file. I'm going to call it Hello World. And I recommend you follow along with me, or you recreate this on your own afterwards. So now I've created this Hello World C++ file, and it's categorized it under my source files folder, which is good. Another thing to know is that these folders are virtual folders. If you look at your Explorer window, you'll see that these files aren't really, or that these folders don't really exist. So these folders aren't here, external dependencies, header files. They're just metadata stored in your Visual Studio project file. Okay, so the basics of a C++ application. So basically, this is all you need to make a valid C++ application. Here we have an integer, we have a main function that returns an integer. And then in the curly braces, we have one line that says return 0, which is an integer. So what's happening here is that Windows will try and find, for console projects, it will try and find the main function, which is called the entry point. And then it'll run any instruction within the curly braces of the main function. So a function is basically a set of instructions encapsulated by a name in these curly braces. So in this case, all our project does is return 0. So it won't actually display anything to the screen, but it will compile as a valid project. One way for me to test this is to go to the debug drop-down menu and start without debugging, Control F5. So when I do that, the output window shows what's going on, and you can see nothing is output, and it just says press any key to continue. Because I hit Control F5, where I started without debugging, it prompted me to close my console window. If I start with the debugging enabled, it'll just pop the window up and then disappear, just like you saw there, which oftentimes is good if you want to actually debug your program. You can add a breakpoint in this gray area here, and then you can hit debug or F5, start debugging. I'm going to start using the keyboard shortcut. You can see it stops my program at line 3, and it gives me any variable names, which there are no variables, so I can't really see anything. So this isn't really important right now, but what is important is that Control F5 or start without debugging will give you a visual of your program and also ask you to press any key before your program closes. So that's important if you want to see output of your program. So I'm going to go ahead and include what's called the IO stream. Now the IO stream is a library which contains input and output stream functionality for C++. There are quite a few libraries that C++ comes with that allow you to do different things. So in this case, IO stream is the one we're going to focus on. If you want to explore these other libraries, you feel free to do that. Go into Google and type in C++ libraries and see what the results are. There are quite a few libraries, and you probably don't want to know what they all are immediately. It's best to learn them as you need them and as you go through tutorials. At least that's my recommendation. Now, if I want to use some input and output functions, I'm going to use the cout. I'm going to use the cout function. I know what the cout function is. Basically, cout will output data to the console window. So now cout hello world, and I'm using these two greater than less than symbols. This is called the stream insertion operator, and basically what it does is it sends my text to the stream, which is then displayed in the console window. Now end L basically adds a new line to the console window, and again it's sent through the stream insertion operator. So you can see that there's these two underlines here. It says identifier. As I roll over them, you can see a little thing pop up and it says identifier cout is undefined. And here the same thing, identifier endl is undefined. Now what's happening here is that everything in the IO stream is encapsulated in what's called a namespace. And the namespace is std. So one way I can get this to work is I can type std and double colons. This is a new operator here called the scope operator. Basically, it just says anything in std, or if I'm calling something from std, it gives me the option to call anything within the std library or the std namespace and use it in a different program that's in a different namespace. So I can type in std here, and you can see the drop-down menu pop up, and it shows me all of the possible functions and objects that are in the std library. If I were to type in endl, you can see right there, endl becomes available there, and it gives me a list of all the different ways to use endl. So that's not important right now. What is important is that you have to type std with the scope operator in order to get access to these functions. Alternatively, you can make the std namespace available globally by issuing a using namespace statement. So if I issue the using namespace statement, I no longer have to issue the std scope operator before calling these functions. And you can see that the underline is gone now. Okay, so now I'm going to hit Control F5, which is also the same as start without debugging in the debug drop-down menu. Control F5. Now you can see my program outputs hello world, and then it asks me to press any key to continue. So that's what this cout statement here does. Cout, stream insertion, hello world, stream insertion, new line. And so you can see it went to the new line and then asked me to hit any key to continue. This return 0 here basically tells Windows that the application terminated successfully. You can send back different numbers to Windows, and you can find out what the numbers will do. But right now, all that's important is that return 0 tells Windows that the program executed successfully. So Windows will respond differently depending on what you return to Windows. So go ahead there. Now if I had hit just start debugging, again the window would pop up and disappear really quickly, and it would not be helpful for me. Okay, so this is kind of an introductory to C++ and a very simple program, just getting the text hello world out to the screen. So I hope this helps, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. All right, thank you.